This farm used to grow everything. That's the first thing people told me when I bought it. Corn, wheat, feed crops. The land had never been left unused. The previous owner didn't leave because the soil was bad. He only said one thing: I just don't use it anymore. No explanation. I figured maybe he was too old. Maybe he couldn't keep up with the work. The land itself looked perfect. Dark soil, soft, held moisture well. No signs of anything wrong. The first week, I started planting. Not much, just a small section, enough to test it. I planted the seeds, watered them, did everything by the book. 3 days later, they started to sprout. Healthy, even, green. I stood there for a while, because everything was going exactly as expected. Day 4, still normal. Day 5, some of them started to slow down, not growing anymore, but still alive. I thought, maybe water, maybe temperature, nothing serious. But by day 6, everything stopped. No growth, no spread, no change, just still. I checked the soil. Moisture was fine. No nutrient issues, no pests, no disease. Everything looked normal, except nothing was growing. By day 7, they started to die. Not drying out, not turning yellow, just shutting down. The green faded. The stems softened. Then they dropped. No resistance, no process. They just stopped and died. I didn't jump to conclusions. Maybe bad seeds. Maybe something I missed. So I tried again. Different spot. Different seeds. More careful this time. The result? Exactly the same. Sprout. Stop. Die. No variation. No exception. After the 3rd time, I started digging. I needed to see the roots. If something was wrong, it had to be under the surface. I dug carefully, didn't damage anything. When I lifted one of the plants, the roots were short, very short. They didn't spread, didn't go deep. They just sat under the surface, like they couldn't go down. I dug deeper. The soil underneath was still soft. No rocks, no hard layer, nothing blocking it. But the roots still didn't go any further. I pressed my hand into the ground. It sank. Normal. No resistance. No resistance. But when I placed the plant back, the roots didn't take. They didn't grip. They didn't spread. Like the soil wouldn't hold it. That night, I sat in the kitchen, looking out at the field. Everything I planted was lying flat. Nothing standing, nothing growing. Just a layer resting on top of the ground, like it had never belonged there. The next morning, I went back out. Didn't bring any tools, didn't plan to fix anything, just to look. I stepped into the field, stopped, looked down. The plants weren't lying the same way anymore. I crouched, looked closer. They weren't rooted. They weren't even pressed into the soil. They were just resting on the surface. No part of them went into the ground. No sign they had ever been planted. No mark of being pulled out. Just sitting there, like they had never gone in. I stood there for a while. Didn't touch anything. Didn't move. Just looking. And for the first time, I started thinking, maybe the problem isn't that things won't grow here. Maybe this land just doesn't allow anything to go into it. I didn't plant anything else after that. There was no point. Nothing would grow. Nothing would stay. So instead, I decided to test something else. That afternoon, one of the smaller animals died. Nothing unusual. It happens on farms. Age. Weakness. I'd dealt with it before. Normally, I would bury it, somewhere out past the field, deep enough, covered properly. That's how it's always done. So I did the same thing. Picked a spot, dug a hole, deeper than usual this time, just to be sure. The soil gave easily, soft, loose. Nothing strange about it. I placed the body in, covered it, pressed the dirt down, packed it tight. No gaps, no air, just like it should be. Then I left it. Didn't think much about it after. Not until the next morning. I walked out to check the field. Same as before. Nothing had changed. Nothing growing. Nothing rooted. Just that same flat surface. Then I saw it. A few feet away from where I buried it. The body. Lying on top of the ground. Not torn up. Not dug out. Just there. Resting on the surface. Like it had never been buried. I stood there for a long time, looking at the hole. Still filled. Still packed. No sign of disturbance. Then back at the body. Clean. Undisturbed. No dirt on it. No sign it had been underground. Like it had never gone in. I didn't touch it right away. I walked around it. Checked the ground. No tracks. No digging. Nothing. Just the body. On top. I buried it again. Same spot. Same depth. But this time, I went deeper. Much deeper. Took longer. Used tools. Made sure it was well below the surface. I covered it again. Pressed the soil down. Hard. Stayed there for a while. Just watching. Nothing happened. Everything looked normal. So I went back. Told myself, maybe something had gotten to it overnight. Maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a simple explanation. There always is. That's what I kept telling myself. The next morning, I went back out. Same place, same spot. And it was there again. But not in the same place. Closer. a few feet nearer to the house. Still on the surface, still clean, still untouched. Like it had never been buried at all. I looked at the ground behind it, the spot where I had buried it. Still intact. Still sealed. No collapse. No opening. Nothing. And yet, it was out. And it had moved. I didn't bury it again. Not that time. I left it where it was, walked back slowly, eyes on it the whole time, trying to understand what I was looking at, what this land was doing. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the fact that it came out. That part I had already accepted. What I couldn't ignore was the direction. It hadn't come back to the same place. It hadn't stayed where I buried it. It had moved. Closer. Toward the house. The next morning, I didn't even go to the field first. I stepped outside, looked straight ahead, toward the yard, and I saw I didn't go near it anymore. Not after the third time. Not after seeing it move closer. I left it where it was, stayed inside as much as I could, told myself if I didn't touch it, if I didn't interact with it, maybe it would stop. But that didn't last, because after a while, it wasn't just the body anymore. It wasn't just one thing. It started happening to everything. Anything that touched the ground. The first thing I noticed was a tool. A shovel I left outside, right next to the shed. I had used it earlier that day, set it down, walked away, didn't think about it. The next morning, it wasn't where I left it. It was a few feet closer to the house, lying flat on the ground. Clean. No dirt on the blade, no sign it had been used, like it had just been placed there. I picked it up, checked it. Everything was normal, so I set it back down. Same spot, same position. I made sure of it. Then I went inside, locked the door, tried not to think about it. The next morning, it was closer again. Not much, just a few feet, but enough. Enough that I couldn't ignore it. It wasn't random. It wasn't chance. It was moving. I started testing it. Not just the shovel. Other things. Small items. Buckets, tools, anything I could leave outside. Anything that made contact with the ground. Every time, same result. Left in one place, found closer the next day. Always closer. Always toward the house. Then I tried something different. I didn't leave it on the ground. I placed it on a wooden crate, raised, off the soil. The next morning, it hadn't moved. Still in the same place, exactly where I left it. I stared at it for a long time, because that was the first rule, the first thing that made sense. It only happened when something touched the ground. I tested it again, more carefully this time. Placed one object directly on the soil. Placed another on wood. Same area, same conditions. Next morning, The one on the ground had moved. The one on the crate hadn't. That confirmed it. It wasn't random. It wasn't wind. It wasn't animals. It was the land. The soil itself. That's when I looked back at the body, the one I buried, the one I stopped touching. It was closer now. Much closer. Much closer. Near the edge of the yard. Closer than anything else. And it hadn't stopped moving. Not once. I didn't go near it. Didn't need to. I could see it clearly from the porch, the distance shrinking every day, every morning. Closer. Closer. Until it reached the edge of the house. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights on, watching the door. Because for the first time, I realized something I hadn't before. It wasn't just pushing things up. It wasn't just rejecting them. It was moving them. Bringing them toward me. And if that was true, then there was only one question left. What happens when there's nothing left outside to move? I looked down at the floor, at the wood beneath my feet. Solid, safe, not soil, not connected. At least, that's what I told myself. But something didn't feel right. Not anymore. Because the house was built on the same land, the same ground, just covered. And for the first time, I started wondering how long it would take before the ground underneath me started doing the same thing. I didn't leave the house the next morning. Not after it reached the edge. Not after realizing how close it had gotten. I stayed inside, watched through the window, waited. The body was still there, right at the boundary, just outside. Not moving. Not yet. For a moment, I thought maybe it had stopped. Maybe it couldn't go any further. Maybe the house was enough to block it. I wanted that to be true. I needed it to be true. So I waited. Hours passed. Nothing changed. No movement. No shift. Just the same still shape, right outside. I didn't step out. Didn't get closer. I stayed where I was, inside, on solid floor, away from the soil. Then I noticed something small, on the kitchen floor. A cup, left near the table. I hadn't touched it since the night before. I knew exactly where I left it, right by the leg of the chair. But now, it wasn't there. It had shifted, just a few inches, closer to the door. I stood there, looking at it, trying to be sure, trying to convince myself I just remembered it wrong, that I had moved it without thinking, that it was nothing, just a mistake. So I tested it. I placed the cup back, exactly where I thought it had been, aligned it with the chair, marked the spot in my head. Then I stepped away. Didn't take my eyes off it. Just stood there, watching. Nothing happened. Minutes passed. Still nothing. It stayed in place, exactly where I left it.
And that almost made it worse, because I knew what that meant. It didn't happen while I was looking. It never did. I turned away, just for a second, long enough to grab something from the counter. When I turned back, the cup had moved. Again, same direction, closer to the door. Only a few inches, but enough. I didn't touch it this time. I just stood there, looking up the floor, at the wood, at the space between the boards, trying to understand how something inside the house could follow the same rule. I checked underneath, got down on my knees, looked along the edge, between the planks. Nothing. Just darkness. Still. Empty. But it didn't feel empty. Not anymore. I went back to the window, looked outside. The body was still there, right at the edge, not moving.
Not moving. Waiting. And suddenly, I understood why. It wasn't trying to come in. It didn't need to. Because whatever was happening out there was already happening in here. I looked back at the cup, then at the door. The distance between them, smaller now, not much, but enough to see, enough to measure, enough to know it wouldn't stop, not at the door, not at the wall, not at anything I thought was a boundary. I stepped back slowly, away from the floor, away from the door, until I reached the center of the room, the furthest point I could stand, the furthest distance from everything. And I stayed there, didn't move, didn't turn, didn't blink. Because at that point, there was only one thing I knew for certain. The ground didn't stop at the edge of the house. It didn't stop at the walls. It didn't stop anywhere. And for the first time, I understood what was really happening, not just to the plants, not just to the animals, not just to the things outside, but to everything. Every object, every place, every space connected to this land. Anything that touched it would be pushed up and moved closer until there was nowhere left to go, except here. I didn't move from that spot. Not after I understood it. Not after I saw what was happening. The cup was still there, closer to the door now, just inches away. I kept my eyes on it, didn't look away, didn't blink, because I knew the moment I did, it would move again. But that wasn't the part that scared me anymore. Not the cup, not the body outside, not the tools, not anything I could see. It was something else. Something I hadn't thought about until then. Something much simpler. Me. I looked down at my feet, standing on the floor. Solid, still, but connected. Connected to the same ground, the same land. just separated by wood, just covered. Nothing more. I didn't want to test it, but I had to. I needed to know. So I did the only thing I could. I marked my position. Right there on the floor. A small scratch next to my boot. Something I could measure. Something I could trust. Then I stood still. Watched it. Watched the mark. Watched my feet. Nothing changed. Everything stayed in place as long as I kept looking, as long as I stayed aware, as long as I didn't break that line. Minutes passed. Then longer. My eyes burned. My body ached. But I didn't move. Couldn't move. Because I already knew what would happen if I did. At some point, my focus slipped. Just slightly. Just enough. I blinked. Only once. When I looked down again, the mark was farther away. Not much. Just a few inches. But enough. Enough to know. Enough to confirm it. I didn't move. Didn't step. Didn't shift. But the distance had changed. Which meant I had. I kept watching. Forced my eyes open. Tried to stay locked in place. But it didn't matter. Because it wasn't about movement. It wasn't about steps. It wasn't about what I did. It was about contact. About being connected to the ground, to the land, to whatever was underneath it. I looked toward the door. The cup was almost there now, just at the edge. One more shift, and it would reach it. I looked outside. The body, right against the wall, closer than it had ever been. Not moving. Waiting. Just like everything else. Then I looked back down. At the mark. At the space between us. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. The distance shrunk. Just slightly. Without me moving. Without anything shifting. Just closer. I stepped back instinctively. Just one step. And that was the mistake. Because the moment I broke focus, the gap closed again. Faster this time. More than before. Not inches. Feet. I froze, heart racing, trying to understand how fast it could happen, how much I had already lost. And then it hit me, not gradually, not slowly, all at once. Everything that touched this land was being pushed up and moved closer until it reached one point, one place, one position. And after that, there was nowhere else to go. I looked at the door. The cup was gone, completely gone. Not outside, not inside, just gone. I looked at the window. The body, gone too. Nothing left in the yard, nothing at the edge, nothing anywhere, because everything had already reached the same place.
I looked down at the mark. It was right at my feet now. No space left, no distance, no separation. Just contact. Complete. I didn't move, didn't try to run, didn't try to stop it, because I finally understood there was nothing to escape, nothing to avoid, nothing to fight. The land wasn't rejecting things. It wasn't pushing them away. It was gathering them, pulling everything to one point, one place, one level. And once everything reached it, it didn't need to exist anymore. I closed my eyes. Just for a second. Just once. And when I opened them, there was nothing left. No house. No field. No ground. Just flat. Empty. Still. And for the first time, I understood what the land had been doing. It wasn't stopping things from going down. It wasn't keeping anything underneath. It was removing everything above it.